Begin the current Daf, Mesechta Chagigah Daf Gimel. We begin 3 lines up in the bottom of the Yomim on Chav Beis and Beis. We will continue the concept mentioned in our opening Mishnah of our parak, the third and final parak of Mesechta Chagigah, parak Chleimah V'Kodesh, which we spoke about 10/11, Chumras Kachim as over Truma, and we continue with the third and the further Chumras of Kachim over Truma. Some of the things discussed in today's daf are Haneses HaMedris, Neses HaTruma, Avoyes HaKodesh. That someone who's carrying an object that's tummy from a medris, that supported the weight of a certain person, such as a zav, can also at the same time carry truma contained in a separate earthenware barrel, but not that of Kodesh. I think Gemara explains, Ma'aser Shahaya, the reason was it was decreed in response to an actual incident involving a sandal that was tummy, which defiled the barrel of kachim, and it was specifically a story with kachim, not with that of truma. The utensils that were completed while being guarded from tuma still required tvila before use with kodesh, but not for truma, because of tzinor dama aretz, were concerned of the saliva from dama aretz might have previously fallen on the utensil, and now even when it's finished, it still has that tuma of dama aretz. That the kohen who would burn the paraduma, they would purposely make him tamei before, then immerse him to demonstrate that Tavol Yoim could go ahead and do the avodah, not like the tzedukim thought that it has to be with someone who has Erev Shemesh. And finally, Mishum Yuchel Yeshiva, only the utensil that's designated for sitting can become tamei medrash when a zav sits on it. So we begin the current daf. Chav Beis Amud Beis, 3 lines up at the bottom of the Amud. We continue with item number 3. We spoke about the first 2 chumras that kachim has over truma. Now we continue with the third one. Haneses HaMedris. The Mishnah said that if someone carries a medris, like for example a chair, a bed, a shoe, something that a zav put his body weight on, which has a tumah of an av, if you're carrying that, Neses HaTruma. At the same time you can carry truma, but you cannot carry kachim at the same time. Says the Gemara, Kodesh my time aloi. What's the reason why kachim cannot be carried at the same time? Says the Gemara, because of a story that happened. I'm going to read the Mishmol. He says, there was a story with an individual who was transporting a barrel of kachim wine from one place to another place. As as the story happened, the strap of his shoe became detached, which Taisa says that it must have remained to the shoe. Taisa discussing how it's only by a cleat that we have. So it's as a cleat, the strap of the sandal, which is a medrash of the zav. Obviously, the zav puts his body weight on the shoe. When the tala, and he took it in his hand, the nicha al pi hachavas, and he put it on top of the barrel, the naflo la'aver hachavas, and it fell into the ear space of the barrel, the nidnis, and it became tummy. That's the only way it would become tummy. It wouldn't become tummy. Taisa discussed it with hesed. The only problem was that this zav, this shoe, this strap got detached, and now it fell in. So at that time they said that okay, if someone's carrying medris, he can carry truma, but not kachim, because that's what happened with the story, that the kachim wine became invalidated because of the medris that fell into the ear space. Now, says the Gemara, if that's the case with truma nami, why don't you say the same thing? Truma also can become tamei if you put in the ear space. Right, we're talking about a barrel that's a klicheres, that it's not going to be metallic from the outside, but it could fall inside also, and obviously it's not a tum on the medris, so why are we saying it's a problem for only kachim and not a concern for truma? Says the Gemara, you're right, technically it could be the same thing. I mean, generally wouldn't just make it zeros, right? Obviously you're allowed to hold something that's tar and something that's not going to contaminate it, but Hamani, who's the Tana, is Reb Chananya ben Akabihi. That he says, wherever the Chum made exer on something because of a story that happened, where many times we find that the Chum found that this is a breach, and this is, like we see a story happen, we have to be careful. They only made exer is very similar to the story, and like that same element. The Amma that he says, La'astru el biyarden, the Gemara is going to say exactly what this is referring to in a second, but this is regarding something else. They only made it forbidden in the Jordan River, and the Besvina, and on a boat. Ukamaisa Shalia, like there was such a story. So therefore, since in our story regarding carrying a medris and the tahar item was specifically story happened with kachim, so therefore they made the gzera specifically by kachim to say, okay, you're not allowed to carry a medris at the same time that you're carrying kachim, because we had such a story where a guy took the strap of the shoe which became detached, and he put on top of the barrel that it shouldn't get lost, and it fell into the barrel, and they made the kachim wine tamei. So because of that, we did only by kachim, but not by truma, because it has to be similar to the story. Now, says Gemara Maihi, what's this other story? Meaning, you want to know who is the Tani? He says who he says this idea that we only made it similar to what the story happened, which was actually another story regarding something holy. So, what's that story? The Tani of Lina Braisa, a different halacha. It's also by carrying. A person should not carry the purifying waters of the paraduma and the ashes of the paraduma, and to transport it across the Jordan on a boat. And neither could he stand on one side of the river, and throw it to the other side of the river. Neither you cannot float it on the surface of the water. And it's really yarkavim. He should not have them, the ash waters, ride al gabehem on the animal, not on his friend. All these are forbidden ways of transportation. Only is permitted if his feet were firmly on the ground. Because, as the Gemara is going to shortly tell us, the story that happened was on a boat. Now, as Rashi explains, a boat is always in the airspace. It doesn't travel on land, water, air, but it's not grounded. And so therefore they made a gzera on all air spaces that are not grounded. But you could transport it on over a bridge, meaning you can get across a body of water, just not going across the water or in the air, because your feet are touching the ground. And that you don't have to be concerned about. But all other forms of transportation across the water would be problematic. And this is Echad Yardim Echad Shar. This is not only by the Jordan River, this is by all rivers. He says no, the Asr will be Yardim. He said it's only forbidden on the Jordan, not by other rivers, and the Besvina on a boat. But let's say you could float it across the water, or you could stand on one side of the river, you could throw it across the other side of the river. And like the story that happened. So we're not finished yet, but we see that Reb Chaim Kavi is this man the Amar who says, if something happens that we found that this is something we have to rectify, we only do it like the story that happened. And therefore he says it was only on the Jordan that this story happened, and it was only on the boat, and that's where the story happened. That's how we're going to make the example that you can't do that. But things that are similar, we're not going to do that. And therefore he's the same Tana of our Mishnah that's saying that we made the Gzera only by Kudshim because of a story that happened that someone was carrying the shoelace of the medrash and it fell into the barrel, that you can't carry it the same time as a Kudshim, and not a Truma, even though technically it would be the same concern, but that's not the story. And therefore we make a Gzera, and the Gemara says, my Maisa Shaya. So he says this in another context regarding that you're not allowed to carry the ash waters of the Paraduma across a body or river. He says it has to be exactly as the story happened. My Maisa Shaya says, well, what was the story that happened? It says, there was a story with an individual, he was transporting the, I just heard in the news recently, someone they was carrying the boats of like this Maseratis or whatever, like $400 million worth of cars that drowned in the ocean. You got to be careful, you're transporting very precious things. So this guy is transporting mechatas and efachatas. These are the things, the purifying ashes, and it's not easy. You have to recall to get the paraduma what it takes to get the red heifer, right? Saying Al Kapanim. So he was transporting these things b'yardin and b'svina in the Jordan and on the boat. And what happened was there's an olive size of dead person that was lodged in the bottom of the boat, and therefore the ash waters were leaning over, were hovering over, were over the airspace of the mess, and thus became tummy. So Baisa Amru, at that time they said, La Yisa Adam Mechatas Ve'Fachatas, a person is not allowed to carry the ashes and the water of the purifying waters, and to transport it on the Jordan and on the boat. And again, that's machlekes. That even Taisa says that even the Rabbanim it doesn't have to be exactly, but it was specifically regarding the Paraduma, its waters and its ashes. But machlekes was, is it only on the Jordan and on the boat, or anything that's similar? Any river, not just the Jordan, and any way of transporting in the airspace, and as long as it's not grounded on the feet. But again, we see Reb Chanan ben Kabi was the one that says it has to be exactly, and therefore he's the Tanav Mishnah that says that you cannot carry medrash at the same time as specifically kachim, not truma, because that was the story that happened. Someone was carrying a barrel of kachim wine, and the shoelace fell inside, thus being matami from the abra of the klicharis, which is matami of his b'toiche, and contaminating the one that's inside. It was a sort of habit kachim, and therefore it's one of the 11 chumras of kachim over truma. Now, related to the halacha of the Mishnah, Ibarlo, the following question: Sandal tummy. This that you said that you were geyser, that you shouldn't carry kachim, was with a sandal that was tummy. That's the medrash. My question is the Gemara sandal tar mabel. What's the halacha? Were we geyser that you can't carry even a tar sandal because then you might come to carry a tummy sandal? Another question is chavis pesucha. Most definitely the gzeir was by an open barrel because that was the whole story that happened, that the shoelace fell into the open barrel. But chavis stumama, what would be the halacha? Would we say the gzeir is even a closed barrel? We shouldn't have let because to an open barrel. So those two questions the Gemara doesn't answer, but the Gemara says a third question. Is it gzeir or is it considered one big gzeir? Yeah. So the Gemara says, what's if a person violated this gzeir and he did carry the medrash at the same time that he carried the kachim? What's the halacha? So it's machlekes. Rabbi Shloimy says, someone did violate and he did carry, we're going to consider as tamei. That's a chamer. Is this maila? Sarah says no. As the halacha would paskin, because ultimately nothing happened. It's a stringency, it's a mile that we do. But if you went and you carried it that way, it would remain tar. Now, the Gemara is skipping now number 4 and number 5 because we really explained number 4 and number 5 already. I mean, we're going through the 10, 11 stringencies. We already explained number 4. We said in the previous parak regarding the garments of Oichle Truma is medrash l'kodesh. We said that's levels of the garments from one status to another status. And number 5, we already explained when we were discussing that what was the first one, the matzvil and kelim terchelim. We said, is that a chatzitza or is that because of connected to the mikvah waters? Then we were discussing number 5, which was discussing that by kachim you have to untie and dry it and then table. And conscious by truma you can knot it, because then we said that's halach of chatzitza, and that's when we were discussing that with number 1. So we're just skipping number 4 and number 5, and we're going on to number 6. Stringent number 6 was Kelim Nigmarim B'Tahara V'Chulu. Regarding garments that you finished it in the state of purity, because that's what's important when you finish it, because up until then it's not a garment, it's no problem. When you finish it in the state of purity, still you have to toilet for kachim and not for truma. So it says the Gemara, I don't understand, the Gemrina Man, who finished this garment? Elim and the Gemrina Chava, every time that a scrupulous person for the laws of Torah, he's the one who finished the garment. Amarat Maros, and he finishes the thing. So Lamalu Tefillah, why isn't it Tefillah for Kachim? It was done with a pure person. So what are you going to say? No, Amaret's finished it. So then, how can you call it finished in the state of purity? Saying it was finished state of purity, and still you have to type it. How can you call Nigmar B'Tara because Amaret's doing this? Everything of his bodily fluids, he's tamei, everything. So Amar Bashil Amar Masna Mishmul. He says, the truth is that the Chavra finished it. So what's the concern? Because of the tziner, means like the pipe, all the piping, the fluids that come out of the Amaretz, maybe his spit out of the mouth of the Amaretz fell onto the garment when the Chaver was holding on to it. So the Gemara says, I don't understand. The Anafal Amos, when exactly did the Amaretz spit on this garment? If it was before he finished Halav Manahu, it wasn't a garment then, and therefore that should not make it tummy. Elabasli the Gamri, which already told me after he finished it, but Mrs. Zerbu, you told me that he's careful. He said he does not letting Amaratz get near this garment because we're using this for kachim. Says the Gemara, the truth is that maybe the Amaratz spit on the garment before it's finished. So what's the problem? It wasn't a mana, it wasn't a kliyat. But the Gamri, maybe when it was finally finished, it was still moist. And it's going to be mitamim because maybe he's a zav. And the Gemara needed that Nandam base tells us that the zav and the spittle, they contaminate when they're moist, they contaminate when they're dry. But maybe it was still moist when the garment was finished. His spittle is on it, and if it's being matami. So that's why for kachim we say that you have to tevil it. So the Gemara makes the following dig. Tefillah in, it sounds like, okay, you have to tevil it. That's what it's saying. But her b'shemesh light. But you wouldn't have to wait for sundown for this garment that maybe you tell me the spittle of Amaretz was on it. So it says Gemara must need like Rabbi Lazar. So our mission is obviously not like Rabbi Lazar. Here it gets a little complicated, just the reading. But our mission is obviously not like Rabbi Lazar. Why? So the Gemara introduces it now. We learned the following mission set this part. Shreifes is a tube. shechatcha lechatas, which was cut, not chatas. We oftentimes, when we talk about the paradum, we call it chatas, because it's called chatas in the Torah. But basically, we want to put the ashes of the paradum, you have to put it in a container. So, if let's say someone cut a tube to put inside, to make it into a tube, to put the ashes of the paradum inside of it. So, Rabbi he says, yitfol miyad. He says that you could table it right away, and that is, you don't have to make it. We're going to explain that as we go along. You don't have to make it tummy with something else. Why? Because it's already tummy, as the Gemara is going to explain. Now, what are we referring to? So, Rashi tells us that all the things that they did for the para aduma, they did with a kli that could be mekabel tumah. Meaning, it actually goes through when did they do things that were not mekabel tumah. It depends on the stage. Certain things they did b'dafka, not a kli, only kli even, not mekabel tumah. But they when they were making it on the day of, so they would use a kli that's mekabel tumah that requires tefillah. Now, but they would use it before Harav Shemesh, as the Gemara is going to explain, specifically for a reason. So although throughout the week beforehand they would do things that are not mekabel tumah, to be more careful, because of this day that the B'dafka did something that was going to become tummy, it's a little bit of a back and forth cheshbon. Usually we'd try to keep tahara very, very careful. But as we're going to shortly explain, the Tzedukim, they held more chamer, that you have to have, like usual, Kadshim, Harav Shemesh. But as the Gemara elsewhere learns out, no, actually a Tful Yom is sufficient. So we Davka did it with a Tful Yom. So we had to prove that he's a Tful Yom, so we had to make him Tamei, and then Toivel him, and then use it before Harav Shemesh. But because of that leniency, we have all these stringencies to show that Meinish does Mezen Azoy Michael, so we did a million other chumras because of that one kula. But Al Gaman, we needed to do that to make sure that it's Tamei, and then Toivel, and then use it before the day is over. So on that, Rabbi Laz is saying that this tube that was cut for the ashes, you could Toivel it right away. And in other words, in the Chiddush in that is, what do you mean right away? Meaning you don't have to go ahead, meaning and make it Tamei for something else. It's already Tamei. That's essentially what he means to say. Yitful miyad means you don't have to go and make it Tamei and then Toivel it. You could Toivel it right away. It'll do the job. That's what he's saying. Now, Shloimy says, no, he says, Yitame. He says, first, we got to go ahead and make this tube Tamei. So Rashi disagrees, but Rashi says that they would touch it with a sheretz and make it Tamei. Then you could Toivel it. But we have to make sure it's Tamei first. We need them to know that it was a Toivel today and it's a Tful Yom. So first we Tamei that shleiferes, that tube, and then Toivel. Now, but we asked on this machlekes, the chatchaman, wait a second, who cut this tube? Who's producing this shveiferes? Even the chatchaver, if a chaver cut it, so lama li tefillah. So then, what do I need a tefillah for, according to Rebbe Lazar? Meaning, there is no tumah. So there's no recognition for the Sadducees, for the Tzedukim, that you're toiveling and it's a tful yom. What's tful yom? There's no tumah over here. So you're saying gitful miyad. So go ahead. You cut it, you can table it. But how can you just table it? Where's the tumah? The chaver cut it. So what are you going to tell him? You can say, no, it's cut by Nama Aretz. But Holy Rabbi Shua says, how do you understand the other mandama? That's Rabbi Shua says, yitma v'yitful, you have to tame it, and then you can table it. Hatame v'kai. Whereas second below it's tummy already. It's from the Nama Aretz. We consider him tummy. So how do we understand the machlekes? Who cut it? He says, I'll tell you. Truth is that the chaver cut it. So if he cut it, so then why do you have to be why is it tummy? Why is it yitful miyad? Because Amaretz are around, and because of the spittle of the Amaretz. Says Gemara, I understand. Nafal emes. When did it fall on this tube? Before they cut it off the tree, halav manahu. So then it wasn't a vessel yet. Wait to me after that he cut it. So mizazarba. So then he's careful. I says the Gemara, no, we're talking about before it was cut. But maybe when he cut it, it was still moist. And therefore, Rabbi Elazar is saying that you don't have to be metamed. It's really tameh because of the amaratzim that are around and that they spit on it, and for that we're considering it already as tameh. So the Gemara explains. Bishlam Rabbi Shua and according to Rabbi Shua that no requires you to be metamed because hainu the ikka heker letzeduk. So obviously there's going to be a recognition to the Sadducees that they held that someone who's a bona fide tama has to have sundown. And here, no, we're using it full yom, as we're being metamed, we're putting a dead sheretz on this tube. So it's proving the point. It's not, because that's what we're learning in Masechtas Para, the metamed hoyas are kohen asefes apara. They would dafka made the kohen who do bringing the para duma, they made him tameh. And then they would table him. Why? Why would we have to make him tameh? Because we wanted to remove from the opinion of the Sadducees. They said, oh, the Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg said, has to be done by someone who already had sundown. And according to Rabbanan, no, it's full yom is kosher. Now, how do they know that? Because that actually they learn out from an extra pasuk. It says in the pasuk in Bamidbar, it says v'hiza hatar la tameh. The pure person sprays on the tameh person. Now, tar means that. What do you mean the tar? Of course, the tar person. No, the inference is that it was tameh. That teaches that it's full yom is going to be kosher by the paraduma because we know we're talking about a tar person. Because previously the pasuk had said v'lokach ezav v'tama b'mayim ishtar. So already said that Ishtar has to be doing this production. So why do you go back and now in the next pasuk when you say Behiza Hatar al Tameh, why say the word Hatar? Just say Behiza al Tameh. We already mentioned these Ishtar. So obviously Tar is saying even the basic minimum of Tar. Okay, and we find that Tvul Yom is called Tar because the pasuk elsewhere says in Vayikra Yudalad that V'rochas b'mayim b'tar. The moment you wash yourself, you're Tar. So we see a Tvul Yom is called Tar. So when we're saying Behiza Tar al Tameh, that we're coming to include any Tar, even a Tvul Yom. That's how the Rabbanan know it, not like the Tzedukim. So we understand according to Yeshua, what you're gaining by being metamed the shveveres, because then we're proving to the Tzedukim that we're doing what it's full yet. Elder Rabbi Elazar, but according to Rabbi Eliezer, that doesn't require. He's satisfied with the tuma of what's called klisha nigmar b'tahara, which is the chumrah that we're mentioning in our Mishnah. Any klisha nigmar b'tahara, we're concerned for tzinoy dama aretz, and that itself makes it tameh. And he's saying, so you don't have to be tameh, you could just be tablet right away. So I don't understand. If you say that in general, be'inin head of shemesh, then in general, that when you are tabling kalim that were finished in the state of tahara, not like our Mishnah, that if you generally need to have hair of shemesh, so I could understand that over here that we're not mandating hair of shemesh. So that would prove to the Sadducees that although generally you need to have for tahara hair of shemesh for kachim, but here the Torah tells us explicitly that v'hiza tar l'tameh, any tar works even tvul yom, which generally tvul yom doesn't work for kachim. It's an exception to the rule. But eliyam ba'amol bin hair shemesh. But if you're saying like our Mishnah, that in general for this chumrah of the tzinoy dama aretz that you chayshish when you would nigbar kalim b'tahara, you don't need hair shemesh. Like you have a dike from our Mishnah. Our Mishnah only says you need a title. It doesn't say you need to have sundown. So my care, let's look at it. What type of recognition of tzedukah is? Obviously, our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Eliezer, because Rabbi Eliezer obviously requires hair shemesh from the tziner of the amaretz. Because if he didn't, then what type of a hecker? No one requires hair shemesh. So this is not any different than a regular case of kachim. Obviously, our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Eliezer, because if you had like Rabbi Eliezer, then it wouldn't just be tefillah, it would also be hair shemesh. And our Mishnah says you only need tefillah. So Omer Rav, as you tend to days, he says no, not necessarily that it's not like Rabbi Eliezer. Asuo kamin sheretz. Truth in general, you're right. Rabbi Eliezer does not require hair shemesh for kalim that would nigma b'tahara like our Mishnah said. So wait a second. The problem is then what's the hecker? What's the recognition then? So this is no different than any kalim shenigma b'tahara that all it requires is tefillah. So there's not like an exception to the rule about paraduma that was the whole point of the lafukim, the tzedukim. No, there is. You know why? Because this tube, this shvei fedes, specifically of chatas, meaning of the paraduma, the Chachamim made as if it touched the sheretz, which says there's a larichas in this idea of what Rashi is saying regarding a rishon and the sheni. It's as if a sheretz and av touched it. So therefore, if not for the fact that the paraduma could be made by Tvul Yom, it would require Harav Shemesh. Because it's like as if a sheretz touched it, meaning it's not just the halacha of Kelim Shenigmar B'Tahara. You're right, Kelim Shenigmar B'Tahara, which is the Chomer we're discussing from our Mishnah, is sufficient with Tvila. You don't need Harav Shemesh. Even according to Rabbi Eliezer. So, okay, so then what are you doing Lafukei de Tzedukim? It's not on that point. There's another point. Another point is Chachamim made it as if this Shvevedes was touched by a dead sheretz. So that's a rishon. So that would require Harav Shemesh in the regular kachim. That's just saying that no paraduma is an exception to the rule, and Tvul Yom is going to be sufficient. V'hiza Torah al Tamei, any Torah, even that of Tvul Yom. And that's a chiddush. And that's the hecker for the tzedukim that we don't hold like them. So the Gemara says on the At, if that's the case, that they only made this shveifedes, the items that we're doing for the paraduma, like only like a tamei sheretz, shalei tamei adam. So then it shouldn't contaminate a person, because if you say that this tube is like as if it became tummy from a sheretz, it didn't. No sheretz touched it, but like as if a sheretz touched it, that's not an avatama, that's a rishon. Now that's not matami a person, because we don't find a person or vessels that touch a tumah, which receive tumah from other things, that it should become tumah, except from tumah mes. Because a mes is an avi avois, is a grandfather of tumah. And it says, nefesh and again, whoever touches that person is titma arv, is tumah till the evening. Because the grandfather is, the mes is a grandfather of tumah. The one who touched the mes is an av. And then the av could be mitami, that person making him into a rishon or a kli. But in general, a rishon cannot make an adam tummy. So if you tell me that this tube is like a sheretz touched it, what would make the tube? Make the tube into a rishon. So then it shouldn't be mitami an adam. So Allah Matani, why we learn the brayso that chaytcha u'matvila, the one who cuts the tube and the one who tables the tube, toin tefillah, he himself needs tefillah. Why doesn't he need tefillah? What happened to the person? He touched the tube, which is a rishon. Could you tell me that what we did for this tube is that we made it as if a sheretz touched it? So why would that be mitami a person? Svela says the Gemara, you're right. No, a different answer. Asur k'tmei meis. They made it as if this tube became tummy from a dead person. Oh, that makes the tube into an av. That could be mitami a person. So the Gemara says, wait a second, you're getting yourself into hot water now. If you're telling me that the tube is like it touched the dead person, if it's like as if it touched a dead person, you should have to spray itself with the ash waters, day 3 and day 7, because that's what happens. Something became tummy from the mess, it requires a purification with the paraduma waters for 7 days. So Lamatani, why do we learn the brayso that the one who cuts it and the one who tables it, toin tefillah, which it sounds like that everything needs tefillah, the shleifedes, and the one who cuts it and the one who tables it. So it sounds like tefillah in. Only the tube only needs to be tabled, but azah shleisha shviyalai. But to be sprayed day 3, day 7, you don't need to. Why not? It's tummy from a mess. The other rather says the Gemara, slightly nuanced. It's the same answer, but more nuanced. They made the tube as if it was touched by a dead person, and now it's on its day 7. So therefore, it could be the tummy in the adam because it's tmei mes. But it doesn't need to be sprayed day 3 and day 7 because it's on day 7. Which Taisa discusses, it's like as if it already was sprayed, but Taisa says the tefillah, before it says Taisa, there's 2 tefillahs. So all he has left is tefillah. So we're going to do a tefillah, but it's like as if we made it on it's like on day 7. So the Gemara says, come on, they never made something like a novelty by the halachas of paraduma, meaning, even though they made many milas by the paraduma, like we described, because they were a little bit disgraceful in the tahara of the paraduma, because they would contaminate the kohen who's going to burn it, where they specifically wanted to make him into Tvul Yom, so they made a lot of chumras. But however, the Brisa tells us they never made up something that's nowhere else. They never made up like a totally random new idea. Now, if you're going to tell me that they made these kalim that were nigma b'tahara, this tube, let's say, as if it's a Tamei Mace on day 7, moreover. There's no bigger chiddush than that. Like, what does that mean? How do you make this tube into like a Tamei Mace? Like, you don't find it anywhere that somebody didn't touch a tumah is like as if it is. So I thought you told me you're not going to be mechadish anything in the laws of paraduma. So nobody says no, it's not true. When we said that, they never said like a new idea by the paraduma. It's amru. They didn't say, for example, karda metama moshe. They didn't say that a hatchet is going to have the tumah of, let's say, of a bed. In other words, they didn't make a tumah by a paraduma for a kli, let's say, that's not fit for a certain tumah. For example, let's say a hatchet. A hatchet is not designated for sitting, and it cannot become an abatuma of a moshe hazav. So they didn't say that, but paraduma, we're going to treat it as a moshe. You can't say that. That would be a chiddush. It's something that it categorically is not there. But let's say a vessel that's fit to be mekabel tumah, there they could be mechadish to make, if it didn't touch a mess, as if it did touch a mess, because it's not conceptually a new idea. It's just it didn't happen, but technically it could happen. That we said that they would. But Ketan like Linda Bryce, the pasuk says in Vayikra, Yeshiv ala kli. It says that if someone sits on the vessel that Asher Yeshiv ala zav, that the zav sat on, that's a medrus, that's mishkan b'moishav. So he has to wash his garments and he has to bathe himself in his tummy till the evening. Now, when it says v'hayeshiv ala kli, so Yochel, you would think that any vessel that the person sits on, Kafir saw b'yashav alel. Let's say the zav turned over a measuring tool, and he sat on it, or tarkav, which is what's called trei v'kav, which 3 kav is a half a saw. He turns it upside down and he sits in it. You would think there would be tamei. Some of the pasuk teaches no, but hayeshiv ala kli. If someone sits on the vessel, asher yeshiv alav. It doesn't say asher yashav alav. Really, it should say asher yashav in the past. Meaning, if someone sits on the vessel that is zav sat on, that's a mishkav, that's a moishav, and you're going to get the tumah of that medrash. No, it says asher yeshiv in the present tense that he sits on. That's coming to teach us that we're only talking about something that's usually designated for sitting. That's yitman. That's going to make him tamei. To tell you mishum yuchali yeshiva, that's only something that's designated for sitting. That excludes this. Shanley, that we tell the person, hello, I'm like Vedastam Laftena, get up, we want to do our work. Okay, what are you sitting on this? This is our tools that we use for our job. That would be a chiddush that we wouldn't say. We wouldn't say, paraduma, that a measuring tool, that could have tumas mishkan. No, that's something that conceptually is not there. But however, to say that we make it as if it touched a tumas mess, which technically, if the tube touched a tumas mess, it would have that halacha of tumas mess. That we would say, even though it didn't happen. So that's not considered a chiddush and therefore again, that's how the Gemara ultimately answered and said that we had this problem. What's the heker l'tzedukim according to Rabbi Eliezer? Could he be the Tana of our Mishnah? We said he could be the Tana of our Mishnah. We said, but what do you mean? But all you need is tefillah for the halacha of our Mishnah of klish nigba b'tana. So what is the chiddush to have tefillah yoim, which anyways you only need tefillah? Say no. Besides the halacha of kedush nigla v'tahara, there's another halacha that ultimately the Gemara explained that they made the shvevedes, all the things related to the paraduma, as if it's to make meis b'shvi shaloi. That would need a tefillah with harav shemesh. And we're saying no. Here by paraduma, you only need full yom because that's what the Rabbanan learned from the pasuk. Not like the tzedukim, and therefore our Mishnah could be like Rabbi Eliezer. It's not that it has to be only like those who disagree with Rabbi Eliezer. Now we continue with item number 7. Of the chumras of kachim over truma. We said in the Mishnah, kli mitzaref mashav b'teichel l'kodesh. A vessel will combine whatever's inside of it for laws of kachim. Meaning, if let's say a sheretz falls onto a bowl of beans, and each bean is a separate entity, so generally the sheretz that it falls onto, that bean would become a rishon, next one would be a sheni, if it's truma would be a shlishi, if kachim would be a revi, and that's it. But for kachim, we said no, it's all one big thing. Whatever's inside of the bowl is all going to be tamei as a rishon. But I will look at truma. We didn't say that for truma. Truma will have that of wherever it's matama. That's it. The rest of the beans are going to be talked. So where do we know this idea of chumrah of a kachim from? So Amar B'chan says, "Dama kurz a pasuk mamidbar." Pasuk says, "Kaf achas, 1 spoon, sar zahav of 10 golden, malay ketaydas that was filled with incense." That was talking about what they were all bringing. Kaf achas, something like that. And therefore, what do you see from this pasuk? That it's talking, what do you mean 1 spoon? Of course, a kaf in the singular is 1. What's kaf achas? Why are you saying the word achas? Achas also l'chamash b'kaf, because the pasuk means whatever's inside the spoon, achas. All the ketayos is all as 1, just by being in the same spoon. Now, Master Rav Kana, however, Rav Kana asks from the Mishnah Masechtas Idiyos, The beginning of that Mishnah is telling us that Reb Shimon testified on the ashes of the paraduma that if a tummy person touched part of it, the whole thing becomes pus. That's what Reb Shimon said. Then Hoisi Rabbi Kiva, which our Gemara is quoting, Kiva adds on, and he says not only that, but even Hasailis, the flour, Bakataris, and the incense, Balavain, and the frankincense, Vagacholam, and the coals. Meaning, even though these things are not even food items, but what's called Chibas HaKodesh, the fact that there is an endearment of that they have a holy status of kachim, that actually prepares it, makes it vulnerable for the halach of tumah, which is generally only for food items. Where Shem Nugget Tfulim B'Miktsasei, but Tfulim touch part of it, Paslas Kulei, he invalidates the whole thing. Why? Because the vessel is combining it all together. So ask the Gemara, now Vaham, this testimony of Rabbi Kiva obviously was Dirabbanhi. It was rabbinic law, not biblical law. Mimai, how do I know this? Because Meitani Reisha. Let's go to the beginning of that Mishnah. The Mishnah said, hey, Reb Shimon testified, regarding the ashes of the paraduma. Shanaga hatame b'miktsasai, if a tummy person touched part of it, that he contaminates the whole thing. Now, as Rashi explains, that most definitely has to be rabbinic. Why? Because if you think it would be like the pasuk Reb Chanan brought of Kaf Achaz, you could only learn that from Kachim Mizbech from there. The Ketaitis is things that are burnt on the Mizbech. You wouldn't be able to know regarding the ashes of the paraduma that's not even done in the base of Mikdash. It's not even the Har Maria, it's on the Har Zaysin. And so you see that that's a rabbinic law. And Bektani, what does the Mishnah continue? Chaysev Rebbe Kiva. Rebbe Kiva adds on, which means to say, you're adding on to the principle of Reb Shimon, which Reb Shimon's principle is rabbinic. So, and what does Rebbe Kiva add on? Ketaitis. So obviously Ketaitis is that the Kli's Mitzav Komash B'Teichai to become Tameh is rabbinic law. How are you bringing me a pasuk of Kafach Asasaros B'Melech Ketaitis that it's Deraisa? When you see from the Mishnah of Idiyas, it must be rabbinic law, because Rabbi Kiva, who says this concept, is only adding on to what Rabbi Shimon said. Rabbi Shimon is obviously rabbinic law, because he cannot be from that pasuk, because that pasuk kachim is bad, and he's talking about paraduma ashes. So Amar Shlagesh Mershim Bakapar says, no, it's not difficult. As we continue to have a Dal Manal. We didn't need this edus of Rabbi Kiva, which, yes, obviously Rabbi Kiva is saying is rabbinic law, Ella only for the case of the flour of, let's say, l'shiyori mincha, to the leftovers of the flour offering. That's where it's going to be from rabbinic law that the kli is going to be mitzav komash b'toicha. You know why? Because when it comes to deraisa, that which is tzarich l'kli, that which needs a vessel. For example, let's say ketaitis, that's in the kaf, which the pasuk is talking about. Then biblically, a kli mitzarfa, the vessel is going to combine it because it needs a vessel. She'en tzarich l'kli, that which does not need a vessel. For example, let's say the leftovers of the flour offering, which is eaten by the kohen, doesn't need a vessel. Then ein kli mitzarfa, right? Biblically, the vessel's not going to combine it. Oh, but then the rabbis came along, rabbinic, and they were geyser. The avagav the tzarich l'kli, even though you don't need a vessel, but if it is in the kli is mitzarfa, the vessel's going to combine it. That's the rabbinic law. So I think, well, wait a second, but that's only one of the cases. Tenach sells, that's good with the case of the flour. But ketaitis, which Rabbi Kiva explicitly mentions, Vilavina and the frankincense, Michael, what are you going to say? Those need a vessel, and still Rabbi Kiva is saying those as cases as Hoysid Rabbi Kiva on the rabbinic law, but I thought you told me that those are Deraisa because it's Tzarech L'Kli. So that's a biblical law that Kli Mitzav Masha B'Teich. What Rabbi Kiva is saying, that's from rabbinic law. Says the Gemara, Amr Rav Nachman Marab Baravua, he says, Kugun Shetzvarim Al Gabi Kartava. We're talking about where he spreads it out, he piles it up on top of a cooked hide, meaning a piece of leather. So, like a leather mat. Now, Deraisa, from biblical law, Yesh Le'Toich, if it has a receptacle, then it combines. Ein Le'Toich, if it doesn't have a receptacle, then we don't consider that as a Kli. And then Ein Mitzvah doesn't combine. Now, Asur Rabban V'Tiknu, but the rabbis came along and they instituted, the Avagav, the Ein Le'Toich, even though it does not have a receptacle, Mitzvah, it's going to combine. So yes, Midoraisa, Kafachas, yes, Malay Ketaitis, we know it's from biblical law. So what Rabbi Kiva is saying over here, that it's Hoysid Rabbi Kiva is from rabbinic law, that's going on a kertava. That's going on a piece of leather that doesn't have a toich. Biblical law, it would not be mitzvah. For rabbinic law, yes, it's going to be mitzvah. That's the case of ketaitis that we're saying that's all going to be combined as one. Now, the Gemara says, Upliga de Reb Chana. This teaching of Reb Chana that we said, that he holds that the law of tziruf is combining for kachim as it's one, as biblical, it disagrees with Rabbi Shloimy. He says, Me'edusa Shemikiva. Where's the source of a halacha in our Mishnah, one of the chumras of kachim over truma, that whatever's inside is going to be combined versus truma? It's from the testimony of Rabbi Kiva in that Mishnah Idias that Mishnah Zu. Our Mishnah that the kli is going to be mitzvah kamash b'toichai. Where do you get that idea from? Says Rabbi Rabba, that's from Rabbi Kiva's testimony. Wait a second. Kiva's testimony is rabbinic law. Our Mishnah is talking about a regular kli. Obviously, that's disagreeing with Rabbi Chanan. Rabbi Chanan held, no, this is the Raisa. The Taisa discusses why he's saying in one of the Milas is that it's rabbinic, it's Dodger the Tumat Rabbanos. But upon him, that's a machlekes that we have. Is it a biblical halacha? Just Rabbi Kiva is saying a rabbinic element? Or, no, like Rabbi Rabba, that no, there is no biblical source, we don't learn it from Kaf Achas, and it's all rabbinic, and that's actually where our Mishnah gets from the testimony of Rabbi Kiva in that Mishnah. It's a thing to any time.